Have you ever wondered what your clothes would say about you if they could speak? What if every thread, every color, every pattern you wore told the world exactly who you were, what you believed in, and what you had survived? For Native Americans, clothing did exactly that. Every color, every stitch, every feather meant something. Native American fashion wasn't made for beauty, though it was beautiful. It wasn't made to impress, though it was impressive. It was made for purpose. Before brands and runways existed, before fashion became an industry, clothing told stories of courage, of tribe, of spirit. In a world without written language for many nations, garments became the pages. Warriors wore their victories, healers wore their wisdom, elders wore their journeys. This is the story of clothing with a purpose. The purpose behind the clothing. Imagine standing in a village hundreds of years ago. You see a woman walking by in a dress decorated with intricate beadwork. Without a single word, you know her tribe. You know her family lineage. You might even know whether she's married, whether she's a mother, whether she's completed certain rites of passage. Now a warrior passes. His shirt is painted with symbols. Eagle feathers hang from his hair. The patterns on his chest tell you which battles he fought, the scars and the honors, the losses and the victories. His clothing is his resume, his autobiography, his prayer. This wasn't decoration. This was identity. In Native American cultures across the continent, from the plains to the forests, from the deserts to the coastlines, clothing served purposes far beyond keeping warm or covering the body. It was spiritual armor. It was a connection to the natural world. It was a statement of belonging. The act of creating clothing was itself sacred. Mothers and grandmothers would sit together, beading by firelight, singing as they worked. Each stitch was an offering. Each pattern was passed down through generations, carrying the stories of those who came before. Materials were chosen with intention. Deer skin wasn't just soft. It represented humility, grace, the ability to move quietly through the world. Buffalo hide meant strength and provision, honoring the animal that gave its life. Eagle feathers were the most sacred of all, representing a connection to the Creator, worn only by those who had earned that honor. Even the act of tanning a hide, of softening leather, of preparing materials, these were done with ceremony, with gratitude, with respect for the animal spirits who provided them. A Navajo weaver didn't just make a blanket. She wove prayers into every row. A Lakota woman beading a war shirt didn't just decorate fabric. She embedded protection for the warrior who would wear it into battle. When you understand this, you begin to see Native American clothing differently. These weren't just garments, they were living documents, they were prayers you could wear, they were stories you could touch, colors, symbols, and materials. Let's talk about color. Because in Native American fashion, color wasn't just aesthetic. It was language. Red was life itself, blood, energy, the sun rising over the horizon. Warriors often wore red because it represented vitality, courage, the willingness to spill blood or have their own blood spilled in defense of their people. But red could also be worn during certain ceremonies to honor the life force that runs through all living things. Black carried different meanings depending on the tribe, but often represented victory, the night, or the spirit world. A warrior who painted his face black before battle was invoking the power of the unseen, asking for protection from the ancestors who had crossed over. White meant peace, purity, snow, the blank canvas before creation. Elders often wore white, or those seeking spiritual clarity. In times of treaty or truce, white was displayed prominently. Yellow represented the sun, the east, new beginnings. It was the color of guidance, of illumination, of knowledge. Medicine people might wear yellow in their ceremonies, calling on the light to reveal what was hidden. Blue was less common in early traditional clothing because natural blue dyes were harder to produce. But when it appeared, it often symbolized water, sky, wisdom, the feminine. But color was only part of the language. Symbols told even deeper stories. A circle represented unity, the sacred hoop of life, the endless cycle of seasons and generations. You'd see circles beaded into dresses, painted on shields, woven into blankets. Animal symbols were totems, spiritual guides. A bear represented strength and healing. A wolf meant loyalty and family. An eagle was the messenger between humans and the divine. A turtle carried the world on its back, representing patience, longevity, and Mother Earth herself. Arrows pointed to protection, direction, movement forward. A single arrow meant defense. A bundle of arrows meant strength and unity. One arrow breaks easily, but many together cannot be broken. Thunderbirds, powerful spirits that brought storms and renewal, appeared in the art of plains tribes. Kokopelli, the flute player, brought fertility and joy in southwestern cultures. Even geometric patterns had meaning. Diamonds might represent the four directions. Zigzags could represent lightning, water, or the journey of life with its ups and downs. Triangles might symbolize mountains or tipis, representing home and shelter, and the materials themselves carried significance. Porcupine quills were one of the first embellishment materials, used long before European glass beads arrived. Quillwork was painstaking. Each quill carefully dyed with natural pigments, then flattened and sewn into intricate designs. The patience required to create quillwork was itself a spiritual discipline. Shells, especially dentalium shells from the Pacific coast, were so valuable they were used as currency. To wear shell jewelry was to wear wealth, but also to carry the voice of the ocean, the realm of powerful water spirits. Elk teeth were highly prized. A dress covered in elk teeth might have hundreds of them, and since each elk only has 2 ivory teeth, such a dress represented enormous wealth and status. But more than that, it honored the elk spirit, bringing its qualities, nobility, strength, endurance to the wearer. Feathers were perhaps the most symbolically loaded material. Not just any feather could be worn. Turkey feathers might be used for certain dances. Hawk feathers represented vision and awareness. But eagle feathers, golden eagle and bald eagle, these were sacred beyond measure. They could only be earned, never bought. They represented acts of bravery, leadership, spiritual devotion. Even the direction a bead was sewn could carry meaning. The way fringe hung on a garment, whether a pattern moved clockwise or counterclockwise, nothing was random. Everything was intentional, the headdress and status. Let's focus on perhaps the most iconic piece of Native American fashion, the war bonnet or feathered headdress. In popular culture, the headdress has been reduced to a costume, a cliché, something worn at music festivals or Halloween parties. But this misses, completely, what a headdress actually was. A plains warrior didn't wear a headdress to look impressive, though it was impressive. He wore it because he had earned it, and the earning was everything. Each eagle feather in a headdress represented a specific act of honor or courage. Counting coup, touching an enemy in battle without killing him, the ultimate display of bravery, saving a fellow warrior's life, leading a successful hunt that fed the tribe. Acts of sacrifice, of leadership, of putting the people before yourself. A young man didn't wake up one day and decide to make himself a headdress. Feathers were gifted to him by the elders, by those who had witnessed his deeds. The headdress was built over years, sometimes decades, one feather at a time. A full war bonnet with a long trail of feathers down the back. This was worn by chiefs, by the most respected warriors, by men who had proven themselves again and again. It wasn't a fashion statement. It was a visual record of a life well lived in service to the people. And it wasn't worn casually. A warrior might own a headdress but only wear it for the most significant occasions, major battles, important ceremonies, treaty negotiations. To wear it was to invoke all the courage it represented, to carry the weight of all those acts of honor. Different tribes had different styles. The Sioux and Cheyenne of the plains created the flowing bonnets that have become most famous. The Crow favored headdresses with feathers standing straight up. Some tribes didn't use feathered headdresses at all, having their own distinct ways of marking status and achievement. The Iroquois, for instance, had the gustoway, a feathered cap where the number and position of feathers indicated which nation the wearer belonged to. Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, Tuscarora, each had their own configuration. But across all these variations, the principle remained the same. A headdress was earned, not purchased. It was honored, not assumed. A chief didn't wear a headdress to look powerful. He wore it because he had proven he already was. Fashion as communication. Think about how much information you try to convey with your clothing today. Your job interview suit says professional. Your gym clothes say athletic. Your vintage band t-shirt says something about your taste, your age, maybe your rebellious streak. Now multiply that by 1,000. In Native American cultures, clothing was a complete communication system. Before you spoke a word, before you gave your name, your clothing had already told a story. A woman's dress might immediately identify her tribe through the style of beadwork, the colors used, the cut of the garment. Lakota beadwork looked different from Cheyenne, which looked different from Crow. An experienced observer could tell not just the tribe, but possibly the region, even the family lineage. The dress might also indicate whether she was married. Some tribes used specific patterns or wore certain items only after marriage. Whether she had children, whether she held a special role in the community, healer, storyteller, keeper of sacred knowledge. For men, the communication was even more explicit. A warrior's shirt might display symbols of his war honors, the number of feathers he wore, the paint on his face before battle, red and black in certain patterns that told other warriors which clan he belonged to, which society of warriors he was part of. Some tribes had warrior societies, groups of elite fighters who had proven themselves and earned membership through specific deeds. Each society had its own regalia. The Kit Fox Society, the Dog Soldiers, the Crazy Dogs. If you saw a man wearing the distinctive clothing of one of these societies, you knew immediately what kind of warrior you were dealing with. And it wasn't just about external observers. Within the tribe, clothing reinforced identity and belonging. When a young person went through a coming-of-age ceremony, they often received new garments that marked their transition from child to adult. The clothing they had worn as a child would be set aside. They would dress as the adult they had become. During certain ceremonies, specific regalia had to be worn. A medicine person conducting a healing ceremony would wear garments marked with sacred symbols, perhaps a robe painted with the bear, invoking the bear's healing power. A person participating in a sun dance might wear nothing but a simple cloth, showing humility before the Creator. In some tribes, if a warrior distinguished himself in battle in a particular way, he might be given the right to wear a specific item, a wolfskin cape, for instance, or a shirt painted with lightning bolts. Others would see this and know his story without asking. And perhaps most powerfully, clothing connected people to their ancestors. A woman might wear a dress using beadwork patterns taught to her by her grandmother, who learned from her grandmother before her. Wearing that dress wasn't just fashion. It was carrying forward a lineage. It was honoring those who came before. It was saying, I remember. I continue the story. Warriors sometimes wore medicine bundles or talismans given to them by elders, by medicine people, or inherited from fathers and grandfathers. These items carried prayers, protection, spiritual power accumulated over generations. No two pieces were ever identical. Even if two women from the same tribe made dresses in the same style, there would be subtle differences. A personal touch, a family pattern, a variation that made it uniquely theirs. This is what made Native American fashion so profound. It wasn't mass-produced. It wasn't following trends. Every piece was personal. Every piece was sacred. Every piece told a story that couldn't be told any other way. Modern influence. Fast forward to today. What happened to this tradition of clothing with purpose? The answer is complicated, painful, and ultimately hopeful. For generations, Native Americans were actively discouraged and often forcibly prevented from wearing their traditional clothing. Children taken to boarding schools had their traditional garments stripped away and burned. They were punished for speaking their languages, practicing their ceremonies, or displaying their cultural identity in any way. The goal was assimilation, cultural erasure. But clothing, like culture, is resilient. In homes, in secret, in moments of resistance, traditions were kept alive. Grandmothers continued teaching beadwork to granddaughters. Grandfathers passed down knowledge of symbols and meanings. Even when it was dangerous to do so, people maintained the thread, literally and figuratively. The powwow tradition, which began in the late 1800s and grew through the 20th century, became a vital space for keeping traditional clothing alive. Powwows were gatherings where native people from different tribes could come together, dance, celebrate, and most importantly, wear their regalia proudly. Today, powwow regalia is some of the most stunning traditional clothing you'll ever see. Jingle dresses covered in hundreds of metal cones that create a sound like rain when the dancer moves. Fancy shawl dresses with brilliant colors that flow like wings. Men's grass dance regalia with flowing fringe. Northern traditional outfits with intricate beadwork. Each category of dance has its own style, but all of them connect back to those traditional principles: clothing with meaning, clothing with purpose. A modern powwow dancer might spend months or even years creating their regalia. They're using contemporary materials, sometimes synthetic fabrics, modern beads, but the designs, the symbols, the purpose remains traditional. They're participating in a living tradition, not a historical reenactment. Beyond powwows, a new generation of native designers and artists is bringing traditional techniques into contemporary fashion. Designers like Patricia Michaels, Bethany Yellowtail, and Jamie Okuma are creating pieces that honor traditional methods while speaking to modern aesthetics. They're using traditional beadwork on contemporary silhouettes, incorporating traditional patterns into streetwear, creating haute couture pieces that showcase techniques like quill work or ribbon work in entirely new contexts. This isn't about making traditional clothing relevant. It always was. This is about showing the world that native fashion is not frozen in the past. It's alive, it's evolving, it's making bold statements on runways and in art galleries while still maintaining that core principle. Here's what we've learned. Native American fashion was never just about looking good. It was about being seen, truly seen for who you were. Every feather told a story of courage. Every bead carried a prayer. Every color spoke a truth. In our world of fast fashion and fleeting trends, we've lost something precious. We've forgotten that what we wear can mean something deeper than the brand name on the tag. But Native Americans never forgot. Through centuries of suppression, they held on to this truth. Clothing with purpose is clothing with power. For Native Americans, clothing wasn't worn to impress. It was worn to express their story, their strength, their spirit. Every thread, every symbol, every stitch had a purpose. And maybe that's exactly what we need to remember today. If you want to explore more stories like this, stories that uncover the hidden wisdom of ancient cultures and show us what we've forgotten, subscribe to Ancient Horizons. Because the past has lessons the present desperately needs. Hit that subscribe button. Every story we uncover together is a thread connecting us back to what matters. What will your clothing say about you?